Hello, everybody. Good morning. Today, I want to talk to you about identity, and it's really something of a world that we live in. Right before I logged on to go live, I kept saying, I haven't been um, discussing more of the philosophical things that uh, I had initially wanted to talk to you about when I started the No One Unscripted project in December of 2019. And a lot has happened since then, you know, and there have been, the world is not the same today as it was uh, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And I, you know, the world is really never the same, but the drastic manner in which the world in general has taken a sort of harder tone to it, it's definitely not something that I would have looked forward to 20 years ago. I sometimes I go back and I think about what we were as a society on September 10th, 2001. And what were we as a people, as Americans? What were we as just people? You know, were we really aware of the real dangers that faced us? I mean, and since September 11th, 2001, up until this very moment, the number of changes, geopolitical, and the number of drastic shifts in how society operates in terms of speed of connectivity, of me being able to live stream something right now and talk to you about news that is coming out as we speak. That sort of a technology didn't exist before. So the question is, what is our collective identity today? You know, and we have to collectively answer that in in a manner that doesn't promote hatred and division. Right before I started this stream, there's news on NBC, on Twitter, that says the FBI says that it's in contact with authorities in Las Vegas after a woman said her Jewish son had a swastika carved onto his back. Jewish student with autism has swastika carved onto his back, mother says. And this is 20 minutes ago. And just last week, we saw the horrors of stand your ground laws and racial prejudice that has largely come from the generational inundation that we have, which is now manifested into Fox News and all the far right media, where hatred is what sells, where lies upon lies upon lies are caked on to build up a psyche that your identity is in crisis, your Americanism is in crisis. When the crisis they are manufacturing is indeed part of the crisis that they are implementing because they want to keep power. Now, there's this paradigm shift that's happened in the world, but when I speak geopolitically, I'm speaking from a very American perspective because that's where my understanding lies, more comprehensive understanding of it. The identity shift started happening when President Obama was elected, and we realized that the United States truly is a place where we can make mistakes, learn from them, and move forward. And back in 2008, in circles amongst friends, we always said that, yeah, there's going to be a backlash. We know there's going to be a backlash. We just didn't understand to what level that backlash would be. We saw the rise of the Tea Party after President Obama came to office. We saw the rise of PACs because of Citizens United. We saw the face of American politics change in a way as to make it sensational for the American consumer, so they don't really think about the practical things about jobs, about money in their pockets, about security of their family and stability of generations, but rather on social issues that would keep a divide amongst Americans. So, fracturing our identity in in a fundamental way by lies, by manufacturing a crisis of transgenderism, or manufacturing a crisis of drag queens being a problem, or somehow being part of grooming. And that's where the authoritarianism comes in. You see the example of authoritarianism very clearly in Governor DeSantis and the legislature in Florida, because I read the first "Don't Say Gay" bill, and I have to tell you, it's a vague, broad law that doesn't even make any. It's a poorly written law. I've talked about it previously, and it is disparate on its face because it uh, discriminates against what the Supreme Court case Oberfell said was um, is a constitutional right. That um, straight and same-sex people have the same rights to marry. So in the context, picked up the LGBTQ people and made them a protected class based on the fact that that was not the status quo before that. Water break. That's what happens when you live stream. And it's a weird place that we find ourselves today, where the battles that I see coming up on the social scene feels like deja vu. When I was in college, standing up for the rights of the LGBTQ community, uh, we were all the fact that my family, my community included gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, queer, intersex, asexual, pansexual, sapiosexual, any sort of intersex, whatever you want or think that your identity may be. That's who we marched for. You know, that's when the Defense of Marriage Act was repealed, when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, when Oberfell came out. It was kind of And at that time, Roe versus Wade was law of the land. Today, that's not the case. Today, Dobbs, uh, I don't know, I think it's B. Jackson or something, is the case that says that a woman's right to choose is only a rational basis right. It's just, the state has to show a legitimate interest in effectively telling women what to do with their bodies. That's how much we've changed in the last 3 years that I have done this podcast, and where I have gone from what I intended to be sort of a beginning of a healing and rebirth and rebuilding process of the American identity, because I had a feeling that Donald would be a first term, one term president, and so sort of that rebuilding is what I was hoping for. That's what I had projected. And after Donald declared war on American democracy on November 10th, sorry, November 4th at like uh, 4 in the morning on election day, saying that he won the election, and I had to change gear. And since then, all of my videos have been about the legal part of it, about seditious conspiracy. And, you know, Bill Maher famously says that he was the first one who said that Donald Trump was not going to leave after he lost. And he was right. And as far as I have seen, I was the first person to say that what is happening here is a seditious conspiracy. And I specifically said that Donald Trump is committing seditious conspiracy because I was only looking at his words and the fallout from that on Twitter. Very narrow scope, and it was still so very clear to me. But as of today, there have been nearly a dozen extremist militia groups that have been convicted of seditious conspiracy. The Proud Boys leader and militia group is currently closing their arguments in a seditious conspiracy case. And I believe that there will be more seditious conspiracy indictments in the future with higher up people's names in them. And I will dive into this briefly as we talk about identity, because it has become so pervasive that American identity has to morph to adapt what happened to us on January 6th and to understand the implications of the birth of the Tea Party movement and then it's morphing into MAGA, the formation of the PACs and Citizens United, and how dark money fueled this really the neo race war era of American politics. It's like Jim Crow and McCarthyism mixed together in a way that, it's kind of like a prohibition, an era of prohibition, of division, of cessation. Uh, you know, it's subversive and seditious, and it continues to this day. So you have to consider that as part of your American identity now. That if you think that it's too much about Trump, yeah, it's way too much about Trump. Are you kidding me? I had this dream that after the election, and especially after January 20th, 2021, I would never have to speak that man's name again. It's not that I'm doing it out of pleasure, you know? So it's because he incited an insurrection, he committed seditious conspiracy. Dozens of people have either been convicted or pled guilty to seditious conspiracy. Hundreds have been convicted of other crimes and and serving time in prison. And it's what else can you say about what happened on January 6th was not peaceful protesters or tourists. The DOJ and courts have 99.99% of the time, I think there's just been one acquittal. I think in one case, in on one count, there was an acquittal. Um, and I think Coy Griffin was the guy, but then he got disqualified from taking office thanks to Citizens for Ethics, which is an think tank and a legal group that um, defends American rights and liberties. Uh, because so far, every step of the way, Donald Trump keeps obstructing the rule of law by manipulating due process. And so I wanted to talk about identity, and I keep going to January 6th and I keep going to Donald Trump. And you can tell that we are at a time of great volatility. We are at a time of choosing between what our founding fathers thought was this great experiment of a government by the people, for the people, of the people, and whatever order you want to say that in. It's an imperative for us to, you know, go back to that and see how important that is and go to the facts. And as we look towards our identity as Americans, let us remember that we walk these walks, and the people who keep inciting and bringing them up, they are weaponizing aspects of society that has really no impact on their constituents' daily lives. They are doing this to inflame and create an identity crisis amongst Americans that will cause chaos, that will cause lawlessness. And honestly, there is no other purpose that that seems to fit here other than to call it insurrection and incitement of rebellion. And that's what we are in the middle of. And that's why identity and politics and what we are facing today all collides, especially for an American. And I believe that we should be thinking about it every single day until there is a resolution on Donald Trump's accountability for what he did. And then we can focus on these divides. But until then, we have to be vigilant. And we have to be vigilant that these various identities that we have, that Donald Trump attacks in a backhanded manner, whether that be transgender people, people with disabilities, elderly people, whether that be um, you know undocumented immigrants, whether that be people who are trying to seek asylum. Uh, he weaponizes these innate fears that, oh, they're coming to get you. You know, they're not coming for me, they're coming from you. For you, I'm just getting in the way. This is the sort of stochastic terror. And the only reason would be seeking power when they don't get the majority vote. That, in effect, undoes this great experiment that our founding fathers started, which is, you know, a rule of the people, for the people, by the people, a republic, if we can keep it. And I believe that we need to make that part of our identity politics. And when we go out and defend trans rights, when we go out and defend women's rights, when we go out and defend LGBT rights, when we go out and defend our right to unionize, when we go out and defend a woman's right to choose, all of these times we have to understand that they all fall within this umbrella that authoritarianism and this lawlessness, this neo-fascist era of lawlessness has made its focal point to destroy. They want to destroy the democratic institutions, not just of the United States, but the world. And the United States is the standard bearer of democracy. It's the oldest continuous republic in the world. France is in its sixth republic. And we have a responsibility that goes greater than our borders, because if we cannot preserve our right to vote, if we cannot preserve faith that our votes are being counted accurately, something for which Fox News just had to pay $750 million, settled to pay $750 million to Dominion Voting Systems, and they have another $2 billion suit against that Smartmatic has brought, and one of their former employees have also sued them for effectively trying to make her a scapegoat for their actions. Excuse me, water break. So thank you for being here, the two of you who are watching. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe. If you don't like, you can unlike as well. That's up to you. But as we stand today, as I'm reading the news, if I get the news that an autistic kid in Utah was assaulted in a manner that a swastika was carved into his back, it is time for us to question our collective identity. You know, it's no longer just about race. It is any vulnerability. It's any institution that threatens the existing power paradigm of the white heteronormative man being at the top of the food chain. And in 2020, even more than Joe Biden's win, Kamala Harris's win was more of a hit to that paradigm. And you'll notice that conservative media and conservative people, they don't want to talk much about Kamala Harris. And by the way, she is doing incredible work every single day. If you follow her on Twitter or any social media account, you know that she's going to the various parts of the world and being effectively Joe Biden's proxy to the world in so many trips outside of the more visible ones that Joe Biden has taken, like going to Ukraine, and she went all over Africa. She went to Asia. She's a powerhouse behind Joe Biden. But you won't see far right even try to mess with that. Instead, they won't say anything, and they try to say something. They'll throw out some conspiracy theory. They'll try to say that, oh, she's useless, or she's not doing anything, and without any sort of basis in fact. But that also brings into identity politics the identity of the non-white woman and the woman in power. And then we had Speaker Emeritus Pelosi, who, is no one can fill her shoes, let alone Kevin McCarthy. And then we have Kevin McCarthy at this time, who has turned the House into a tool weaponized to defend Donald Trump's crimes. It's absurd to say, but if any other institution were doing what Jim Jordan's committees and Kevin McCarthy is doing, then they would be considered accessories after the fact in Donald Trump's crimes. So I think that the subpoena and the settlement that happened with Pomeranz testifying to the January 6th, to the Weaponization Committee will be exactly as expected as any prosecutor who understands that even if they were aware of something going on about an ongoing criminal investigation, that they're not going to say that at the subpoena. They'll just say that I can't talk about that. And so this will be an exercise that will be more sensationalism for MAGA and a counter to the January 6th narrative. Because every single day there's news coming out of new arrests. And I won't be surprised if I go to Twitter right now and see information about there has been a new arrest. Every single day. We have over 1,000 arrests. We have hundreds of convictions. We have dozens of ongoing trials. And some people have even finished their sentences and walked out, you know, and some people are just getting caught. So understanding the sprawling effect and the sprawling, the repercussions of January 6th and everything that went into it, we are still in the very middle of it. And we can get fatigued, and it's weird because I myself will display some impatience on my Twitter feed, and people will tell me to be patient. And I keep telling people to be patient, and everybody's just like, "Oh, we just have to be patient." Uh, and MAGA uses this as, "Oh yeah, you're still stuck on that. Trump is still living rent free in your head." Yeah, he's living rent free in my head, but I gave him the eviction notice. He just refuses to leave, and he even won't pay any rent. So it's one of those situations where he keeps being this fixture in our lives and in the identity of American politics and American identity, because of him, stochastic violence happens on the peripheries that cannot be attributed to Donald Trump directly, but you can see the direct link, and that, I believe, is important for DOJ to consider and for DA Fani Willis to consider in bringing the indictments and maybe even issuing protective orders so as to not target, so as to not inflame matters when he is indicted. I mean, it's a very dicey topic because the First Amendment is a really important right. But I don't know, would a mob boss who had been indicted for several state and federal crimes be allowed to be on Twitter or be on Truth Social and still talk about his crimes or say those same things? That's something that Jack Smith and Fani Willis and the court that administers the case has to assess, because this is a novel situation. And I believe that Jack Smith is taking so long with the obstruction case because he got all the subpoenas. They tried to pull as much executive privilege on that as they wanted, but none of the privileges worked. And finally, I believe that in the January 6th case, by the way, the obstruction case is the easiest to prove, and I believe that we will probably see an indictment or a decision whether to indict or not on that case before we see January 6th. Because I believe that even though Mike Pence won't stop having, won't appeal his decision to testify to to special counsel, because the special counsel speech and debate clause exceptions don't apply, or they apply just maybe a little bit on certain areas where his ministerial duties were, and he's not appealing that. But what we know is that Donald Trump is appealing the general executive privilege assertions around people in his administration testifying to Jack Smith on the January 6th issue. I wouldn't be surprised if that whole thing also included um, uh, Mike Pence, which would be the reason why there would be delay in forming the case and getting the circumstantial evidence needed. And I've described this process before in my videos. So I honestly don't know what's keeping Willis, Fani Willis, from indicting. And it's one of those things where you're like, any day now. Uh, what I mean, whether she decides or not, at least we will have the decision any day now. So we're in the middle of it. We're in the thick of it. And the reason why I'm talking about it in the frame of identity and this being sort of a discussion is because, uh, it's we have to worry about a republic before we worry about the party, before we worry about uh, and remembering the republic, keeping the republic includes our general welfare and safety. And this, it's difficult for me to, today is a very uneasy topic for me because we are still so in the middle of a muck. And I wanted to come out and talk. I just wanted to come out and tell you that we are in the middle of a really messy rebirthing process. I hadn't projected this. I didn't expect GOP to be accessories after the fact in Donald Trump's crimes. Citizens United is a far worse case than anybody could have imagined, as we're learning. So, and I'll leave with that, especially since my dog is now snoring and I have nothing more to add because we are in sort of a place where Donald keeps saying the same shit. DOJ keeps working relentlessly, but it's like swimming in the ocean. And, you know, Fox is paying slowly. Justice happens, but justice happens slowly. So I don't want people to be disheartened by this rant that I've been on for the past 30 minutes. But I wanted to come out and just say that, I get impatient. I'm impatient. There's a lot of bombshells coming out here and there. But the real bombshell will be indicting Donald Trump for inciting an insurrection and committing seditious conspiracy. That is what the crime is. Those are the crimes for which Donald needs to be held accountable. And I believe it'll happen. So, good morning. Have a good day. Bye bye.